one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this earth.
Hold the phone there, Mr. Nixon. Are you calling the Apollo 11 astronauts using a landline?
Who are you? How did you get in here? But yes, I am talking to them using this phone. Is that a problem?
Well, for some on the internet, it is a problem.
What's an internet?
So let's dive into this issue and find out how this was done and if it's truly as impossible as some have come to believe.
I still want to know how you got in here.
On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the surface of the moon, marking the completion of a nearly decade-long race set by John F. Kennedy at the start of the 60s. Nearly an hour into Apollo 11's EVA, Mission Control radioed to the crew that the president had a message for them given their historic work.
Neil and Buzz, the President of the United States is in his office now and would like to say a few words to you. Over.
This call, namely how it was achieved, has become the subject of controversy. Anyone who's familiar with phones from the 60s will know they aren't nearly as capable as today's phones. No luxury of being free of wires, all phones were connected by a cable that interconnected all phones. This was known as a landline, and needless to say, there's not 280,000 miles worth of phone lines spanning to the moon, so how the heck did NASA get the Apollo astronauts to speak to Nixon on a plug-into-the-wall landline phone? Well, put simply, radios. But less simply, telephone exchanges. To fully explain this situation, we'll need to look back at the history of the telephone up to that point, and also look at how NASA communicated to the crew normally. Though the exact inventor of the telephone is up for debate, what isn't debated is the fact that by 1920, people across the United States were connected and making calls to each other. But what matters here is how they did this.
Current to ring the bells is supplied from the telephone exchange, which also contains all the equipment needed to connect one telephone with another. Here we have shown all the parts spread out, but in reality, apart from the battery, they are boxed together in the modern telephones with which we are familiar. We can now see what happens when a call is made. Suppose A wishes to telephone B. First of all, A must lift the handset. When he does this, the switch closes and a signal is sent to the exchange. Meanwhile, direct current flows in the microphone circuit, ready for A to speak. We are assuming that A is connected to a manual exchange. The signal stays on until the operator answers A by plugging into his number. She now plugs into line B and makes B's bell ring by moving a key. When B answers by lifting her handset, the switch closes. The bell stops ringing and the operator connects A direct to B. You can now speak to your friend.
Aldebar 7961. Hello, Joe. This is Eric. Hello, Eric. How are you?
At both telephones, direct current is energizing the microphones. The speech current is transmitted through the transformers and along the line like this.
All right, Eric. Goodbye. Goodbye.
This then is a simple form of circuit by which our telephones can be connected.
But we need to look back to the 1920s, when two technologies merged. Through the 1800s, transatlantic crossings became more and more frequent thanks to the advent of steam-powered ships. By the beginning of the 20th century, large cruise liners were routinely crossing the Atlantic carrying 2,000 to 3,000 people at a time, including laborers, merchants, immigrants, but most importantly for this discussion, businessmen. These businessmen, much like ones today, need to be in constant contact with suppliers, other merchants, and even bankers. Of course, being in the middle of the ocean, phone lines weren't an option, so another technology was used to talk to their contacts back on dry land: radio. But of course, being so far out at sea, their contacts could be deep into the Americas, Europe, or any other continent, meaning that direct radio-to-radio contact would be impossible. To remedy this, stations along the coastline could receive radio calls from ships at sea and connect the calls to landlines. This technology saw heavy use, especially in future battlefronts, like for example the Korean War in the 1950s. Soldiers deep within enemy territory could use radio phones to make a request to be connected by the radio operator acting like a switchboard operator, and talk to Army officials in the U.S., sitting comfortably in their offices using a handheld telephone. The same soldier then could hang up, ask the radio operator to connect them to their families, and their wife could also pick up the phone using the run-of-the-mill standard telephone that every household had. But what does telephones and radio have to do with Apollo 11, the greatest technological feat of the time? Well, let's dive into the second half of this topic and the question, how does NASA even talk to the crew normally? Remember earlier when I explained it simply as radios? Well, that's still true here. All voice messages made by the crew were relayed using one of the vehicle's antennas back to the Earth. To receive these responses across the Earth were a dozen ground stations pointed at the spacecraft location and closely listening in for radio transmissions, with ground stations in Canberra, Australia, Guam, Kauai, Hawaii, Goldstone, California, Corpus Christi, Texas, Cape Kennedy, i.e. Cape Canaveral, Grand Bermuda Island, Madrid, Spain, Antigua, Gran Canaria Island, and the Ascension Islands. Each of those ground stations were wired into existing telephone networks that would relay both the communication but also the spacecraft's data back to Houston and Texas. When someone in mission control wanted to send a message back to the crew, the message would travel from their headset microphone into the same network to the ground station currently connected to the crew and transmits the message as radio waves, much in the way that messages were transmitted by ships at sea in the 1920s or phone calls in the 1950s during the Korean War. So where does Nixon's call fit into this? Well, put simply, the call was made to a NASA facility who used their own switchboard, connecting the incoming phone call into the same line that the mission controllers in Houston used to speak to the crew. Nixon's words were sent to a ground station and broadcast via radio to the crew. No grand conspiracy, just a use of systems that were fine-tuned over the course of the 20th century. It's not like this was the only time this was done, either. In 1985, President Ronald Reagan called the crew of STS-51D flying on Space Shuttle Discovery. Using a nearly identical method, Reagan was patched into NASA's ground station network, which sent his phone call as radio waves to the space shuttle in Earth orbit.
Roger, we copy and already. Discovery, this is the Oval Office. How copy, over?
Oval Office, we read you loud and clear.
Discovery, Oval Office, that's a Roger. Stand by for the President. Commander Bobco? Commander Bobco? Greetings, we've...
Good morning, Mr. President.
Thank you. I thought maybe I might have missed you. Well, listen, we know you've had some frustrations up there, but overall I think we can all be proud of the fourth mission of the Discovery and all that you've accomplished. We've been watching down here, and I mean all of America, and I want you to know that we're rooting for you all. We saw a lot of human ingenuity at work, making the fly swatter-like tool, and as we watched Jeff Hoffman and Dave Griggs install it on the Discovery's arm, we had to acknowledge that was great work, and we're calling all of you up there now the SWAT team. I want to congratulate astronauts Bobco and Williams on the maneuvers you've been putting the shuttle through. This is the 16th shuttle to go up, and we're learning more about its versatility every trip. I've seen you playing, demonstrating with balls and jacks and yo-yos and even a slinky toy in the zero gravity of space. And now I know you're doing this to make some educational videotapes for students learning about the laws of physics. That's really the best thing about our space program, the inspiration and challenge that it gives our young people. You've been conducting extensive tests on the human body's blood flow and digestion. And I want to ask astronaut physician Ray Seddon, how are these tests working out? And Ray, I'd also like to commend you on your dexterity in hitting that pin on the side of the satellite. If you don't mind, I can think of a job on a ranch in California that you might be interested in. But Senator Garn, I know that you're taking part in the health experiments, and Jake, how are you doing? You're doing a fine job up there, but I could use your help down here right now in getting the federal budget under control and arranging assistance for some people fighting for their freedom in Central America, so don't stay up there too long. You know, Jake, maybe in around...
Well, Mr. President, I'm doing just great. I've missed you, but I'll be back on Tuesday. I'm well aware of the vote on the Nicaraguan aid on Tuesday night, and I'll be voting just the way you'd like me to when I get back.
Well, God bless you. And you know, Jake, maybe in around 4 years or so, you could use your influence with NASA to get a certain retired politician a ride on the space shuttle. Well, I just want all of you to know how proud we are of you. Good luck, and God be with all of you. Anyone up there want to...
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We certainly enjoy being here, and I'm sure you realize that we're just the people in space who are the working edge of the great team that's on the ground supporting us. Thanks again.
Well, you're a great team up there, and we're all very proud of you. God bless you.
Also, for those who claim Neil replied too quickly to Nixon's comments, first, let's note it takes roughly 1.25 seconds for radio waves to reach the moon and another 1.25 seconds to come back, for a total of 2.5 seconds round trip. So let's count the time it takes for Neil to respond to the end of Nixon's message.
To Earth. For one priceless moment in the whole history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one. One in their pride in what you have done, and one in our prayers that you will return safely to Earth.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great honor and privilege for us to be here representing not only the United States, but and of
nearly 7 seconds. That's nearly 3 times the amount of time necessary for the end of the call to have reached the crew and the responding broadcast reach Earth. So like everything else in this video, there's no conspiracy. Just a misunderstanding of the subject and corresponding sciences. So hopefully that puts an end to this silly conspiracy. Though let's be honest, it won't.